Alrighty. Well, folks, thank you very much for coming today. As a former frontline naturalist interpreter at a nature center outside Washington, D.C., it got drilled into me that I should start programs on time. And if anybody comes late, that's their fault, not mine. So anyways, welcome to the first session of the Massachusetts Land Conservation Conference. I've actually spoken here before COVID on a number of occasions, and it's a great crowd of people, and I know how terrific it is, just having been involved with the land conservation movement up in Maine, that when you gather 400 to 600 people all on the same page, it's energizing and exhausting at the same time. So good luck with the rest of the day. Today's presentation, Interpretive Messaging, Pathways to Make Your Outreach More Effective. My name is Tom Mullin, and I'm the founder and principal of Interpretive Pathways. It's a consulting firm that helps organizations, land trusts among other things, to share their story and tell their story in a more effective manner through all sorts of ways, but more with an interpretive theme. But I'm a former associate professor of Parks and Forest Resource at Unity College. It's now known as Unity Environmental University. I left right before COVID. Literally, in my last semester there was at COVID when I saw the institution moving towards being an online institution. Which is fine. I teach online with the University of Tennessee Martin. I don't commute, but I didn't want to do it full time, and so they're doing great things and just doing it in a different manner than I was hoping to do for the rest of my life. And I'm a founder and fellow of the National Association for Interpretation. So today, what are we going to be doing? Well, there's some interactive aspects of things. Of course, besides quick Q&A, I have a small breakout session that we're going to be doing. But interpretive messaging, what it is and where it can be found, methods of delivery, publications, I'm about to trip over, publications, waysides and kiosks, what are you hoping for in this workshop, fabrications, installations, some pros and cons, ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, how important and vital that is with all your interpretive messaging, whether it be your printed material, a wayside, a kiosk, wayfinding out on the trail, and then some national resources for learning about those. So what is interpretation? Now, I know that most of y'all, this is really maybe old school for you, and you may not be familiar with the term interpretation. But Freeman Tilden was a writer, a playwright, and a great friend of the National Park Service director back in the 50s. And he wrote, he asked Freeman Tilden, the director, I'd like you to go out, I'll pay for you to drive around the country and visit all the national parks and write a guide to the national parks of the United States. Surprisingly, there were individual park guides, but there was no one comprehensive book that talked about the trails and the history and the geology and the mammals. So that's the gig I want, is for the director of the Park Service to call up and say, Tom, can you drive around to all 63 national parks and write a guide about them? So he did. It took him a year. He drove around the entire United States, actually had in a chauffeured car with the National Park Service ranger guiding him along. He came back and he actually was instrumental in coining the word interpretation, because up until that point they were just, the ranger talks at the campfire, and the park rangers did everything. They did maintenance and trail work and law enforcement and storytelling at campfires. He came back, coined the word, and that set in motion that the National Park Service, which now has quite a few full-time and thousands of seasonal interpreters, at least a year or so ago, they decided that rangers need to be specialized in it. So he came up with this title, definition, and it is still valid today. It really works. Sam Ham is a former professor in Idaho. He actually redefined it as a communication process, not just a way of delivering material. NAI, National Association for Interpretation, has a definition that it's a communication process. This is the nationwide organization that promotes the profession of interpretation throughout the United States and the world, actually. And the National Park Service, just like, not to sound negative about government agencies, their definition is, way longer, but it's still appropriate and tailored for their need. So how do you deliver your story, your message, effectively? And all the research has shown, and interpretive research by college faculty across the country has shown that in-person is probably the most effective means, if done right, than you can do. But most organizations, probably all the organizations in this room, don't necessarily have the staff or the bandwidth to do only in-person interpretation. An effective way of reaching to your audiences, the folks at your trails, your properties, your preserves, is perhaps through some non-personal interpretation as opposed to personal interpretation. Ideally, but it's not always possible. So there's 3 key things I'd like to share with you about when you're writing the text for a wayside or a kiosk or a brochure or anything online. First thing, active voice versus passive voice. Now I have to tell you that, and this is an embarrassing mea culpa story, but I graduated from college and went to Virginia Tech, had a great time. I wanted to be an interpretive naturalist since I was like 15 years old. Didn't know what the term was at the time, but that's what I wanted to do. Got my first job, and I was charged with writing the Curious Nature Naturalist Guide to Royal Lake Park. It was a printed brochure that was going to go to a local regional park in my district. I wrote it up. My bosses all thought it was fine, had nice graphic and drawings. And it went back all the chain like any small governmental agency. It had to be approved by several people. Got to the chief naturalist, Bill Beckner, who became a lifelong friend and mentor for myself. And I was walking by his office one day, and he said, "Hey, Tom, come in here for a second. I want to talk to you." So whenever the chief naturalist, I was like a lowly frontline, the chief naturalist calls you into his office, you start sweating, feeling damp hands, and you're thinking, "Oh, what did I do wrong?" And he said, "Tom, don't worry, I just wanted to talk to you about the brochure." And I said, "Oh, great, Bill, what?" And he says, "Well, I like the layout, I like the pictures, but I have to tell you, the writing is just like a bureaucrat's." And I said, "Oh." And he says, "So it's all there, just rearrange it in an active voice." And I said, "Bill, I have no idea what you're talking about." And so we'll give a couple examples later on, but active voice was critical for all interpretive writing. Strive for tour, thematic, organized, relevant, entertaining. I'll go more in detail, and we'll have some smaller breakouts for that. And interpretive writing is different than essay writing. It's definitely unique, and when done right, can be a powerful tool for your land trust. Okay, so just a couple quick examples. I mean, these are pretty straightforward, and I assume that most everybody in this room knows to write the difference between active and passive writing. But, the dog bit the man is active, and the man was bitten by the dog. That's just rearranging the sentence so that it's engaging and jumps right out at top of you. Oh, by the way, I'll be uploading this whole PowerPoint presentation, besides it being recorded, to the conference's websites also. So you don't have to necessarily take notes unless you want to. So if you're interested in a really fine book and about how to do interpretive writing, Alan Leftridge's Interpretive Writing, available from online, is a tremendous guide for how to write. He's a former professor at Humboldt State University up in California. He retired, I think he might have been maybe 50, and now lives outside Glacier National Park, where he writes interpretive books and guides for national parks and tour companies. I mean, he has a wonderful existence just outside Glacier. But this book, he's a wonderful interpretive writer, and all his writing, besides it being like a manual how to do it, is written in a style that I think you'd find really engaging and worthwhile. And then the other one is, if you're looking for, and actually I think I have a copy of it right here, If you do have staff, or if you're interested in learning the basics of how to do personal interpretation, Sam Hamm's book, Interpretation, Making a Difference on Purpose, it's available online, lots of places, of course. Used copies. It's been out for a while. Actually, I beta tested the book for it with my classes at Unity. Found it really useful as a guide for introductory how to do really fine storytelling. But let's talk about publications. Now, all of us in the land trust community, and I'm on the main land trust network steering committee and volunteer for a land trust up in Maine as well. We have publications, site brochures, trail guides, and I'm striving that all of them always have the tour methodology of how it's reviewed by the visitor. And so we're going to break into some smaller sessions, probably rows, and I'm going to have you score the publication on a piece of paper, and we'll do some reporting out how thematic it is, how well organized, how relevant it is, and is entertaining and enjoyable. If you strive to get like a 7, which is the top score and 1 being the least, then you're really being effective. If you can do a presentation, if your publication, your wayside, is up around 6 or 7, you're on all these tour segments, you're really going to be telling your story in the most effective manner. So if you don't mind, small groups, and I got a variety of I'm sure most of us do this. When I go traveling, I pick up brochures at all the places I go to, and then I say I'm going to look at them later. And I do, sort of, maybe, most of the time. But I've got thousands of them. And so here we go. There you go. Right. Each row, just take a look at it. Whoop, there you go. And if you could, we'll give a few minutes for everybody to take a look at this. Yep, there you go. These are pretty randomly distributed. Oh, and that's a wayside. There we go.
Thank you.
I want to give you one that's relevant. There you go. There you go. That's you. Well, you can just join this group if you like, or you can do it by yourself.
Where are you at? Lincoln.
There we go. All righty.
An hour left.
Okay, I've got time. Thanks. We're doing some small group stuff on publications. You can join this gentleman if you like. Perfect. Out sessions, I think you all pretty much, but I was chatting with these gentlemen right up in the front, and it reminded me, when I was sharing the story about, beginning about the most effective way to tell your story is orally, but personal interpretation, if done right, and if the people doing it are trained and doing it effectively. And I'll just tell you this one quick story that they reminded me. I was at this conference in Pennsylvania, and I was with a colleague of mine, Leon. I won't tell you his last name in case you know him. And it was a historical working museum farm type of house. So we're inside the museum's house on a guided tour with, just walking room to room. And we got to this one room, and it was clearly like a study library type thing. And there was a docent in the room, a volunteer. She might have been maybe 70. She might have been older. And it was like we walked into the room, and like you flipped the switch. And she said, "This is Dr. Johnson's library and study." And that tone of voice. And it was very monotone. And she said, "And this is where he did his writing." And then at the end of it, she said, "Before you leave, make sure you take a look at the pie safe on the window ledge." And Leon, he was a great naturalist and a great colleague, but I could almost hear his head spinning. And when he said pie safe, and I was whispering, pie safe, and then he says, why would you want a pie safe? Out loud. And the docent to keep the pie safe from you. From you. And it's like, oh my God. So she was a wonderful person, I'm sure, but a terrible interpreter. But that just speaks to the point later on about humor. Doing humor in your storytelling is so critical. I don't know if she meant to be funny, but 40 years later, I still remember her answer to that. So why don't we just choose, anybody volunteer and share what you thought about the brochure? How about this group, right up here?
Sure.
You can just tell everybody. If you don't mind presenting to the rest of us, that'd be great. Just stand up a little bit.
Yeah. This is sort of a traditional, if I can learn how to unplug it again, kind of just a road map for, I believe, a region in Italy.
Yep, it's the Cinque Terre.
So pretty standard, I think, if you were like to stop at a roadside place for directions, you could find something like this. On the back, it's organized by smaller regions, and then here's a larger map. So it's pretty standard. I don't think it's necessarily interpretive beyond being informative.
Right.
It's well organized. It's highly relevant if you're looking for directions, but not particularly entertaining.
Right. So this is a great, a lot of people, and I went to the Cinque Terre a couple of years ago. Marvelous time, wonderful part of Italy, great food, wine. But they actually have virtually no interpretation in any of the towns on the Cinque Terre, which is striking in some ways. This is like the main publication I picked up with there. It is very informative, but it's not interpretive. It's just information oriented for the organization. They could do so much more, even like small snippets of the history of the Cinque Terre, but they chose just to make it informational. And I was talking with these gentlemen over here, the brochure styles will vary from country to country also. And so I gave specifically not just US ones, but also international ones for how they do heritage interpretation. So anybody else like to volunteer?
Volunteer.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gerald. I appreciate your engagement.
So this is a historical brochure from the Mariner Museum for Children, Mariners Museum, and it's on slavery and the passage of the slave passage that they went through. It's geared towards children. It says study guide for children.
Mm-hmm.
So it's geared to be informative, but not be like the language. It's not too intense or grotesque or anything like that. Lots of pictures, lots of little snippets of information. It gives also like modern examples of African Americans who are very influential in American history. Has like a word search in the back.
I like
So
word
something
searches.
to get the kids to do.
Or me.
Yeah, anybody, yeah. So I mean, I thought it was very well organized, and very, very relevant to teach children the history, whether they're African American or not.
So would you say it was thematic?
In regards to
Just in general, when you're reading it, did it definitely have a theme that went throughout?
it was
Well organized?
very well organized,
Relevant to the intended audience?
very relevant. I found it especially interesting because my wife was born in South Sudan, East Africa.
Oh, wow.
And I lived there for 3 years, so I really love African history. So this was like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So when they say children, I'm not sure how big I'm not sure 1 or 2-year-old kids.
Well,
would-
no.
Well, no, I think so. That's one thing that I had about that brochure is it was self-guide for children. What is a child? And obviously this is going to be for older middle school audience as opposed to like a younger child, especially since it's a fair amount of text that may be pretty complicated. But if done with the parent, it could
They'd
be
be scared to death.
right. Well, and if done with the parent in combination with the parent, it could be an engaging way of telling that both story. The whole story of enslaved people in the United States. We could tell the story of enslaved people here in Massachusetts because there were before, during and shortly after the Revolutionary War. But I was down in South Carolina. I've been to Charleston. You can have a seat now. Thank you. Multiple times. First time about 30 years ago, and then about 10 years ago, and then just last couple times recently. And during that time period, I saw them change the story at all the places I visited. In 1980s when I went, early 90s rather, they mentioned slavery in passing. Virtually nothing else. It was all about the plantations and Southern and Confederacy, and it wasn't quite the lost cause. That was really fading, but it was really not much. Then 10 years later, a little bit of slavery, and this last time, just a couple years ago, all the plantations tell the story of enslaved populations now. And in some cases, it's actually a major focus. And it's really reversed exactly. Now, there are lots of people who unfortunately resent that, but they're telling the story in a more effective way with personal as well as non-personal interpretation. Great signage at those places.
Mike, another question.
Sure.
Is the coloration important?
Oh, I think they chose the colors on purpose.
Yellow?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons why you might have chose yellow is because you want the brochure to be picked up. If you have it, like I like natural color tones, but a lot of times those will be, don't stand out for being picked up.
Definitely not entertaining or enjoyable because of the subject matter.
Yeah, right. Well, depends on what you're looking for. Well, how about one more?
I'm sorry, can you use engaging instead of entertaining or?
Yes, you could do one. Yeah, that's why it's I think it says entertaining or enjoyable or engaging. It's just the E aspect of things. The other aspect of it is really good trail brochures that you almost all preserves often have some sort of trail guide with them. Engaging them so that it's not just reading at a particular stop, but actually having people do things while they're on the trail is a key element to successful learning and engagement, but also long-time support for the organization. The bottom line is, what I'm trying to share with this interpretation element is that if you tell your story more effectively and in an interpretive manner, it's going to lead to not just enhanced learning about your organization, but potentially long-term sustainability for your organization in terms of support, financial support as well. Exhibits, waysides, kiosks, definitions of jargon, just to go over this aspect of things. Exhibits tend to be for purposes of our presentation today, what you might find inside a visitor center or an office, or perhaps right outside of it. Waysides are like the freestanding signs that you see right there. You see those at state parks, national parks, land trust facilities. Kiosks tend to be where you drive in, park your car, and you walk to the trailhead, and you got the kiosk information, which in my experience, and I'm not trying to be reflective of anybody in this room particularly, but I've been to a lot of land trusts in Massachusetts, and I'd say well over 50% of the kiosks look like the elementary school bulletin board. And nobody, a lot of times people will not stop and read them. We'll talk a little bit about fabrication and also the key element of installation. Yes?
Could you just elaborate, what does an elementary school kiosk look like?
No. I'm like elementary school bulletin board.
Bulletin board. So it's like pieces of paper.
Oh yeah, you go. Yeah, right. You go outside the classroom or the bulletin board outside the principal's office, and all sorts of notices about stuff. You stapled up the brochure. Maybe it's laminated, maybe it's not, and there'll be 8 different things on one page, all about 12 size font, and yeah.
Maybe this will come up, but I'm curious about how to design things for new users versus repeat users. And, is that part of design thinking and design?
Yeah, so it can be, and the effective. We were just chatting about the adapting and recognizing the availability of technology. So I shared with our room monitor, I have a part-time job at the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. I'm a cultural property security guard. It's the easiest job I've ever had to do. I just go to work, make sure people don't touch the art, And when I leave, I don't think about things afterwards, which is great. They have all sorts of interpretation at their paintings and for the exhibits. You know, it's not my job to tell them. It's a lot of passive verbiage. And, you know, I have all sorts of questions about the artist, and there's no use of QR codes at all at this museum.
For people that have bifocals.
Well, actually, a lot of the text for those places are just too dense and too small. I'll have to think about your question. Yeah, no, it's okay. So, with that in mind, I'm just going to skim over a couple of these things, but fundamentals of design. A few things you need to consider. What's the interpretive objective for that site or preserve? What's the main story that you want to tell you about it? Like this one preserve that with the land trust I work with, it's just filled with vernal pools. There must be about 5 vernal pools. And so, you know, it's a seasonal event. It doesn't last a year round, of course. But we decided that we really wanted to encourage people to even get out of their cars and go visit the preserve in black fly season in Maine and see the vernal pools, you know, safely without endangering the property of the resource. And so that's what the brochures and the site brochure actually talks about, is how this is a unique property because of the vernal pool ecosystems. Who's going to be working on the project and what's their specific role? I'm going to show you a wayside a little bit later in the presentation that is a great example of too many cooks. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get feedback from lots of people. That's a key element to it. But the final decision making really can be disastrous if there's too many people making the critical final decisions. And what are the visitors, what are you hoping and expecting them to do? And this is really different based on what your resource is and what the story that you're trying to tell. Now, I was mentioning earlier to this gentleman up in the front about local historical societies. And this is a great example that I've seen at some land trust facilities as well, is that you go to the local historical society, they have great artifacts, you know, amazing artifacts, and yet there's a text that is written by the expert who wants to share every single tiny bit of information that possibly can be told about that artifact. And I'm the type of person who would actually stand and read it. But I'm not the average person. Most people would not. And we'll talk a little bit later about how long you really have and some examples of that. And also, the other thing is, I went to, when I was in Ohio, at Cuyahoga National Park, they actually have tons of canals in the park. And they have exhibits that tell the story, waysides, that tell the story of the canal construction and use in that Ohio Valley area. Well, that was interesting enough. But then they also, in the visitor center, they had music of the songs that the canal boat crews would sing, or that people would sing about the canal history. And they also had brochures and maps that had all the canals. So it was not just the canals themselves, the research, which was amazing because they're still there, and the waysides, but they also had publications and music. And so multiple strands that can actually communicate your storytelling. So fundamentals of design. The first thing you need to ask is, do you need any permits to put your sign up? And I was involved for about 10 years, the Hills to Sea Trail. It's a 45-mile walking path from Unity, Maine to Belfast, crossing over 63 different property owners, almost all of them with a handshake agreement that it's okay to have this trail. And it's still going today, and it's really a great hiking path. So it crosses multiple roads to get to Belfast, and so we actually put up a sign, a little sign, directional sign for the trail. And about 30 days, within 30 days, we had a nice note from the Maine Department of Transportation It said it was a cease and desist type of letter saying, your sign is in the easement right-of-way for the highway, and if it's not removed within 30 days, we will remove it and discard it. So we hadn't realized that, all these types of things about signage and setbacks for highways, and we thought we had set it back pretty far, but it wasn't within the regulation. And the same is true with permits. Some towns require permits for even signage at the entranceways and directional signages. So that's a key element that you need to keep in mind. What's your budget constraints? Now, most of y'all, I'm guessing, if you wanted to create some exhibits, waysides or kiosks, you realize that it's going to cost you anywhere between a couple $100 to $1,000 or more. And unfortunately, that's just the cost of doing things. Now, you're saving money because you're not having the staff time for somebody, whether paid or volunteer, to be at the gate, the parking lot to tell the story, because you have this permanent sign that's up year-round. But at the same time, you have to factor in, and we'll talk a little bit about the costs a little bit later. And what's your timetable? When do you want to break ground and when to install? And the best thing I can think about, I'm on the board with the Penobscot River Paddling Trail. It's a self-guided paddling trail on the Penobscot River from up above Baxter down to the Penobscot Bay. And we hired some folks from the Penobscot tribe to write some interpretive panels for us. And they gave us a timeline that we hired them in September. We'll have a final draft version to you by December 1st, and we'll manufacture and construct the wayside within a couple months, and it'll all be done by February 1st. We're still waiting for the first draft. The timetable for planning can be, and completion is always longer than you expect. So that gentleman, Bill Beckner, said, how do you plan out these things, Tom? I said, well, you do all the planning and you figure all these things out and you calculate it out to the month and then you double it. And that's often what actually ends up being. So what is the cost? The total fabrication cost for a standard 24 by 36, which you see at national park sites, but also state parks, land trusts, it's a standard size that you see. It's also, because it's a standard size, you can often get good deals from fabricators regarding that size. It's approximately $1,000. Depending on what type of material that you're going to use to fabricate it with, it can be more, actually. And depending on, can be cheaper depending on the quality or the fabrication material. And we'll talk about some of those materials in just a bit. Graphically drawing and constructing them is a key element. You want to make sure that it's appealing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But at the same time, you can reduce some of those costs if you have a really talented graphic artist who's a volunteer, or a volunteer who is really good at interpretive writing and writes the text for the exhibit. And you can cut out some of those staff costs or consultant costs or contractor costs to reduce the cost overall. But the actual fabrication and installation are still sort of standard costs that are always more surprising than you might think. Success. So, telling the story, principles, you need, with almost everything, you're wanting the interpretation to provoke people into some, perhaps either supporting the organization or being sustainable. A great example of this, at this conference several years ago, I collaborated with some other folks about dog waste. I think I called it Doggy Do's or Don'ts was the name of the presentation. But there was a lot of concern by land trust organizations in Massachusetts about people who walk the dogs, and they were having issues with dog waste on the trails. And the solution was not just the dog plastic bags, because when you had that, people left the pile right by the parking lot or the sign, and which meant somebody had to come by routinely to pick up bags of dog waste and dispose of it properly. And this gentleman may be in the room, but no matter what the publication was, they had some nice signage, this one land trust, nice signage that told, please take your waste away, we're providing free bags. That's great, but this one land trust, it wasn't working for this popular dog walking area. Until we got a small grant using technology. We hired an intern, a seasonal intern, to go out with yellow flags and mark on this one popular walking trail every dog waste pile that they saw. They bought 500 flags and ran out. Had to get more. And then at each flag, they GPS located it, pinned it, put it on a map of the trail, put it on their website, and put out a PR about it. Within a couple days, the local television station came and did a show about it, and within a week, all the dog waste was picked up. Not by the land trust staff. It got a community engaged, and to this day, there's less issues at this place than before because of the bad PR about bad dog walkers. It's a pretty innovative way, and the fact that they ran out of flags was on this relatively short walking trail was pretty disturbing. Anyway, it was provocative. It got people in action. And using short sentences, concentrate on one subject. Long sentences. I love the concept of Thoreau and his writings. But if you ever read his books, there's usually like 2 sentences in each book. I find him hard. He was writing for the style of writing at the time and era, but I find it more useful if it's just snippets. But he's not succinct. Should complement each other, presenting a unified theme. Relate to it their own lives. With signage, if you can connect to the people's lives, relating to why they might be there or how they could actually include it, maps, photos, illustrate your point, reveal messages through unique or usual visual points. And a good example of this is an unwritten usage of appropriate location. So I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail many years ago now, and when I was down in North Carolina, there was this one-way shelter that we were camping at, and the bathroom, the bathroom, it makes it sound like it was plumbing. The outhouse was out of sight down this one trail, and so I walked down to use the outhouse, and there it was, completely open, just a wooden platform above the pit, a seat, and a backdrop so that you were shaded slightly, but it wasn't covered. And so while utilizing the outhouse, I thought, okay, well, this is pretty wide open. I'm like, if it's raining, tough luck. And while reposing, I looked out and I realized they had actually trimmed all the trees so that you had a magnificent view of the valley below. That was an effective outhouse placement. But what it really says that without even doing any signage, they told an effective story by utilizing an unusual or unique viewpoint. Accuracy is important, making sure that you don't have typos, because everybody will just see the one typo no matter what, and be fun and creative. Remember, this is an old adage, you've seen it before, 10% of what they hear, they remember, 30% what they read, 50% of what they see, and 90% of if they are doing something. There's several companies out now who make incredibly great interactive engagement for their exhibits. So there's a company up in Canada, and they're listed in one of the resources I have for you, that makes waysides materials that you can generate either solar panels on the back, so you can make the exhibit interactive with electrical current, or they have one that's the most popular. It's a hand-generated electrical current. And they said that those are hugely popular with families because the kids are actually, to do the matching game that might be on the exhibit, they're generating electricity to do it. And it also gets the kids really involved. So that's something to really keep in mind. And then bottom line, and this is the key piece I'd like to share with you all, effective exhibits, waysides, and kiosk exhibits contain fewer than 300 words and feature no more than 4 to 5 graphical images. The average, you have approximately 20 seconds to snag a visitor's attention when they walk by a wayside. And they will spend, on average, between 9 and 10 seconds reading it. Great example, go to Acadia National Park. Many of you have probably been there. You may have actually been to Bass Harbor Lighthouse, which was just acquired by the Park Service from the Coast Guard probably about 10 or 12 years ago. You park your car, you walk down, there's a wonderful exhibit by the Lighthouse Association of Maine. And it's an exhibit. It's got pictures of all the lighthouses, drawings of all the lighthouses in Maine, and text about all of them. Probably about, 1,000+ words with wonderful graphics. And you walk down to the lighthouse, and the Park Service has the classic waysides, which have about 300 words or less, and less than 4 or 5 images. So I stopped there with my wife and said, let's take a look and see how many people stop at the lighthouse exhibit, which I did and read every single page of it, but nobody. 0. Hundreds of people walked by to go down to the lighthouse. Nobody stopped at the lighthouse museum because it was too busy. Too much text. Even though it was great information, nobody was stopping at it. And when we went down to the Park Service one, we had to wait our turn to read the wayside because it was engaging, graphically beautiful, and 300 words or less. You have less than 30 seconds to capture them and get your message across. So it's really about 20 seconds. So you can write this down, or it'll be available for you. If you write to me afterwards, I'll send the link to this whole PowerPoint to you, although it should be on the conference website afterwards. This is the Lake Champlain Basin Planning Commission. They did some really great waysides and kiosks over the years, all throughout the Lake Champlain planning area. And then they decided, let's create a brochure, a guide to how we went about this whole planning aspect, which involved much more than just the writing and the fabrication and the installation. But they got tons of citizen input from the waysides. It's really, if you're interested, this is a great website that tells the story about how you can really get community engagement into your wayside design and construction. Fabrication. Now, let's just, quick hand. If you're going to have a wayside out at your preserve, what materials do you think you'd use to create this, fabricate it? Any suggestions? Yeah.
So we've done some where we've used aluminum for the housing.
Yeah.
And like polycarbonate.
Yep. Right. Yeah. So some sort of media composition. Yeah. Any others? Yeah.
We use wood that is harvested locally and from a local sawmill, and someone put it together. So.
Nice. So on top of that, though, besides the frame for it, what do you have on top of the wayside?
Like a laminate.
A laminate type of thing. So let me turn the light on here because I'm going to have to show you some stuff. See if this will work. Yeah, there you go. So there are so many different types of materials you can use to fabricate your wayside. Assuming that you have really nice graphics and you got the text down right, and you want to share that with the visitors to the preserve. And so up here I have a bunch of different examples that you can take a look at afterwards. But if you want to get something up real quick, you can just do, the classic laminate. It works great as long as there's no sun, because within a month or two it fades or just gets discolored. But if you have something that you want something up really quick, or that you know that you're going to be changing on a regular routine basis, this works pretty effectively and is very low cost. I actually, the plastic, Plaxa or plexiglass, it works really pretty well. It's nice for putting stuff. It's relatively speaking waterproof, but this is a great example. It starts to scratch. And then how do you get it clean and refurbished back to it? And plexiglass are not too effective against vandalism. And you'd like to think that people on preserves, and probably your preserves and your land trusts, you don't have much vandalism issues. Maybe. Creating vandal-resistant waysides is a key element. I worked at this one park system down in Virginia, and they had this one park had a boardwalk that went out a quarter of a mile to a tall tower. And on top of the tower, you could see this huge marsh wetlands area. And we had some waysides on there, and so they looked beautiful. They were really well done, and they were fiberglass laminate, fiberglass embedded laminate. Until apparently some yahoos decided they were going to build fires on top of the waysides. I guess they were cold, and of course, the fiberglass, it melted it, and you had to replace it. When they replaced them, that wasn't enough for the vandals. Next time they actually burned the tower down. So and this is like not just right off the road. You actually had to walk into this place. So you'd like to think that vandals don't think about things like that, but they do. Lots of different companies, and I'll share with you some resources about where you can find them. But fiberglass embedded waysides are beautiful, and some great examples. This, prairie butterflies. This company happens to be iZone, but there's lots of companies that make these. One of the ones that's right here on the East Coast is Pannier Graphics. They do a lot of the lamination for lots of different independent contractors. It's really well done. It's relatively vandal resistant. That would melt, and it's not great for bullets, but still not too bad. Some though, many of you may actually utilize these already, but Voss signs, these are really, effective trail signs. They hold up for literally decades. And most of the land trusts that I've seen here in Massachusetts, when they use Voss signs, they're using them for trail signage, wayfinding on the trail to make sure you get to it. One of the complaints I've seen at lots of land trusts is that you may have really good trail signs for staying on the trail, but one of the biggest complaints I have is that lots of folks like to know where they are on the trail. And so you'd say, you take a picture of the map at the kiosk. That's working up to a point, but doesn't know exactly where you are. And you say, you can use your phone and locate you that stuff, but a lot of preserves, there's terrible cell coverage for that type of aspect. So you have to think about maybe having trail signs throughout your preserve so that people know where they are and how they can get out. There's lots of different materials. This is just metal. And it's vandal resistant, relatively speaking, bulletproof. Might go through. Yeah.
Are there certain materials that are easier to get spray paint off than others?
That's a really good. A lot of the signage that you can get from these companies, actually, particularly the metal ones, you can use paint remover and the image still remains. And one example is this one. This is a company called Gopher Signs. Have anybody ever used Gopher Signs? So I was at a American Trails conference a couple of years ago, and I was doing a presentation similar to this one. And I mentioned this sign, and he said, I was walking around the exhibit hall afterwards, and the Gopher Signs was there. And he said, Tom, thanks a lot. We had a lot of traffic here after your presentation. But he said, oh, let me show you about our newest product. And I said, oh, this is really great. And so it's a metal sign with a high image that's been embedded into the metal so that's really protective. It's scratch resistant. You can actually spray paint. You can use paint remover to take it off as best as possible. He says, but a lot of times if it's really damaged, I had a company come, you have a wayside. You've spent maybe $500 to $1,000 on it. For just a little bit extra, our company, because the material that we're making, you can flip it over and have the same image on the back. So if it's damaged on one side and you want to have a nice clean image again, it can just be on the back. You can't do that with some of these other materials, fiberglass embedded or a lot of these other materials. So there's lots of different resources you can use out there. Some are low cost, some are high cost. The higher cost ones tend to last longer, and almost all of them now have UV protection of upwards of guarantees of up to 15 years. Not the laminate paper, but the more expensive versions. So what's the ballpark figures we're talking about? Even just small signs, 12 by 17 inch, depending on the thickness of them. It can range anywhere pretty small, $180, $290, up to $810. And the cost doesn't include shipping, of course, and unless you have them made locally. Now there are companies here in Massachusetts that actually produce and fabricate signage. And you should always think about not just the ones that are nationally recognized or nationally, but there are lots of small local companies that do really good signage. In Maine, it's funny where you find some locations. In the small town in Maine, there's a sign company called Banner Signs. And they do mostly vinyl signs for events and special events and festivals. But they can also do all sorts of other signs that they don't advertise about, but they say, oh yeah, we have the capability of doing metal signs. And it's like, wow, that's great. So check with your local signage also. And the classic base and frame. So this is the thing I learned personally because I was so excited. I was told by my boss when I was the director of the Nature Center, you need a new sign for the Nature Center. The old one fell off the building. I said, oh, we'll get a fiberglass embedded one. So I found the money. It's about $500 at the time, and I got 2 copies of it, some plastic, some white paper copies also, just in case we needed to replace it. And they shipped it to me, and I got it, and I was so excited. And I said, oh, this is great. I'm going to put it up today. And I realized when I took it out, it's like, I didn't think about a frame and what to install it in. So I actually ended up having a volunteer fabricate a nice metal frame that we could attach to the outside of the building. And if you go to Hidden Oaks Nature Center, it's still there today. But the fact of the matter is that I hadn't thought about that. The fabrication of all these things, unless they specifically state it, don't come with the frames to install it and put it into the ground. Okay. I'm going to walk around with this sign right here. Now, I didn't steal this community college. I found it in the barn, and I asked permission. And I said, because they was like, oh, yeah, you can have it because it's like useless. And so I'm just going to walk around, and I want you to take a look at it and see what you think are the pros and cons of it.
What are the numbers? Oh, you have to find the QR code.
So what do you think the pros are? Yeah. You like the map? Yeah, this map right here. The QR code, yeah. Tell them more about Unity and how you can send your son or daughter or cousin or nephew to the college. You know, we're always talking about, you know, recruiting students to come to the college. Yeah.
I found that the map, I didn't understand the relevance of the title. Didn't explain why there's a map. Like, I don't, like, that didn't, I want to learn about sustainability, education, and action, but I don't know why I have to know where the buildings are.
Yeah, so good point. This actually was meant to be sort of like on campus, sort of a directional and a little story about, well, yeah, but it's a mixed message. I gotta tell you, there was like 100,000 people involved with this. Too many people. You know, that was like trying to tell too much. It's way too many words. But I mean, it has pretty nice graphics. Too many words. What's the reason why it was never put up? Pardon me? No, actually, they actually thought about the frames. We'll talk about the frame though in a second.
Something on the map you came up
What
with?
about the map?
You are here?
Well, there's no "you are here." That's a good point. Yeah, the key. Yeah,
Oh, yeah. That's a good point.
yeah. But the biggest reason why it was never installed, and this is so important when you're creating exhibits with maps, is if it changes.
Yeah.
And so before it took so long, they thought it would take like 3 months to create these. It took about almost a year. Too many people. But by the time they actually got these back from the fabricator, they had added 2 buildings to the campus. So the map was out of date immediately, and it was never put up. So the biggest takeaways for this, it's actually, you know, it's some sort of blend of materials. It's actually, they're still up. Unity College moved its campus. The old campus in Unity, Maine is I don't want to say abandoned. That makes me sound bad. It's abandoned, and they now rent space down in Pinelands down in Gloucester, Maine, because it's an online institution. But these signs are still up there, and actually it's been about 15 years now, and they still look pretty good actually. They're not like sun faded, but they held up well. But at the same time, I like some of this, but at the same time, nobody's going to stop to read it because it's just too busy. Let me set that down right there. There it is. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. So, where do you find this information about fabrication? Well, the National Association for Interpretation has a public, you can go to their website, and it's free. You don't have to be a member to look at it. They publish annually a thing called the Green Pages. And in it, it lists interpretive consultants, it has fabricators, people who help you design stuff. And it's, in other words, a directory for interpretive materials and projects and services. And then there's others too. The American Association of Landscape Horticulturists and the American Association of Museums, they also have wonderful resources for vendors who could help you create really great exhibits and waysides and interpretive theming and planning and things of that nature. ADA, so critical and often forgotten about. So, and I'm going to give you an example of one that I worked with up in Maine, but it's true at other places throughout Massachusetts. You have to take into consideration height, surface, visibility, text size. Gerald's comment about a lot of places that the text is too small for people who can't, who have visual issues. That's a really big negative for a lot of places. And surface and glare. You know, and the height is so critical. When Unity put in these waysides on their campus, they had one by the library, and it was actually a really well done one about medicine circles and all sorts of things. It actually had nice graphics and wasn't more than 300 words. But it was at about 5, you know, like I walked up to it, I'm not that tall, but I walked up to it, and it was right about here that it was out. And I said, guys, this is like way too high. So I went to the maintenance department and said, hey, could you could you lower that? I know it's a real pain in the neck, but could you reinstall it so it's like between 38 and 42 inches, so somebody in a wheelchair could actually see it, or perhaps a kid could see it, and make it comply with, even though it wasn't required, comply with the standards for ADA. So they went back and they lowered it about 2 inches, so 3 inches, and it was still beyond 42 inches. And I went to the maintenance department. I said, "Gosh, what's the problem? I can't." And he says, "Oh yeah, we ran into bedrock. We couldn't get it any lower." And I said, "Oh, well, could you just cut the legs?"
Yeah.
And they said, "Yeah, that's a really good idea." So that was it. So, and now it's at like 42, 40 inches. So it actually meets ADA compliance. If you're interested, one of the advantages of government publications is that you can go to like the Harpers Ferry Interpretive Center and their website, and you can download all sorts of free publications. And one of them was like, I'm not saying the Park Service is perfect about it, but they have a whole brochure guide to creating waysides, the whole planning process that you go through, including thinking about ADA. They also have a wonderful downloadable publication about meeting ADA standards for all sorts of things, not just waysides, but also visual publications as well. I'm on the advisory committee for the Friends of Sears Island. It's a very low-key job, but it's this island off the coast of Maine, which is beautiful, and it's just real close to the city of Belfast. And they were rebuilding their information kiosk that you walk up to and see, and they got this giant wayside, which they would send out drafts, and I made comments as I do in my role, and they adjusted, but they really they wanted to do it their way and ignore my suggestions, which was their prerogative. They wanted to. I said, just make sure that you make it accessible for people who are in a wheelchair or have some sort of disability. And they said, "Oh yeah, we're going to take care of it. It's going to be at a certain height." And that's great. So they put it up. It's on this big frame. It's got a little roof that goes out. It's on a platform, so you can stand underneath of it to look at it. And the platform is 6 inches off the ground with no ramp. So I wrote to John, who's the coordinator, says, "Oh, this looks great, but at some point in time you need to put a ramp on it, so if somebody who is not just a wheelchair, but if any sort of disability, it can walk up and read the map because it's like 3 feet away." And he wrote back and says, "Oh, that's a good point." It's like, yeah, maybe we should do that. So anyway, and the other perfect example is anybody here from the AMC? So they were redoing a hut up in the Whites 20 years ago, and how important it was it was past the ADA passage, and they finished it, and they were having the final walkthrough with the building inspector for the town to get the occupancy permit. And the guy said, "Oh, well, this is really nice, except for it's not ADA compliant. This is at a hut, on the tops of the Whites." He says, and they said, "Well, this is like on the top of the mountain." It says, I don't care where it is. It's you need to make this ADA compliant." $70,000 later, it was compliant. Who was the first group to use it? A group of people in wheelchairs who had actually gone up the mountain, dragging lightweight wheelchairs with them to make a point. And anybody actually, if you've ever hiked up in the Whites and gone up to the tops, you might appreciate a ramp getting into buildings anyway.
Was it Madison Springs?
No, it was actually, I think it's Green Hut.
Oh, Greenleaf.
Greenleaf Hut, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. There are no easy ones.
Yeah, there's no easy ones, except at the ones at the parking lot. And then you can actually go to the National Park Service, and the Forest Service and the BLM all have similar sites about ADA compliance. And if you're looking for some really great resources about trails, American Trails website has a huge, extensive library that you can just free access to about accessibility and down. In fact, some of you may know this, but the gentleman who's the executive director, president, CEO of American Trails is handicapped, and He is in wheelchair bound, injured while hiking actually, and he's been there probably about 10, 15 years now. So I'm open to any other particular questions. I'm timing this pretty good. Thanks all for warning me. If there's any particular questions, feel free to ask me. And do come up and take a look at any of these materials, take pictures, and I'll certainly be uploading the PowerPoint presentation to the website after the conference. But thank you so much for attending. Oh yeah, I'll collect up the brochures because I like to collect brochures. If you have anything in particular that you really want.
Good.
Yeah, this one was good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks.